Just today, I was asked twice by two different people, "Hey Isabelle, what being a super taster has to do with our ability to taste wine?" Well, it's not the first time I hear this question. And the truth is that this perceived relationship between being a super taster and being a good wine taster or superior wine taster has been around in the wine world for some time. And it's due to a poor communication about a fundamental scientific discovery that I will tell you more about. And it's been misinterpreted all along. So in this video, I will debunk this myth of being a super taster and being a good wine taster, but I will tell you also exactly what you can do to improve your tasting skills and become the wine taster you aspire to be. Hi, I'm Isabelle Lesschaeve. I'm not a sommelier, I'm a wine lover like you, but I'm also a wine sensory scientist turned tasting coach. I've helped hundreds of students through my platform, InnoVinum Academy. I've helped them awaken their senses, build sensory repertoire so that they can perceive more flavor nuances in wine and become more confident in their tasting notes. So what is a super taster? The term super taster was coined by Dr. Linda Bartoshuk when she was working at Yale University and doing a lot of research on basic taste perception. And she discovered that some people were very sensitive to two compounds, prop and PTC. Prop stands for N6-propylturacil and PTC phenylthiocarbamide. These two bitter compounds were perceived very bitter by some people and not bitter at all by others. So the team of researchers pursued their investigation and discovered that this ability to perceive so intensely prop or PTC as bitter compounds was a genetic trait. It was linked to the existence in your genome of two dominant alleles of the gene TS2R38. And through their studies, they tested a lot of people and discovered that in North America, about 50% of the population were declared just tasters. They could perceive bitterness, but it was not horrific. So their genetic trait was that they had one dominant and one recessive allele of the gene. They found like 25% of the population tested didn't perceive any bitterness at all. It was like water or, paper filter. There was no taste at all. They were declared non-tasters. They had the gene alleles were two recessive alleles. And then there is the super taster, about 25% of the population. They have the two dominant alleles. And for them, the bitterness perceived is super, super, super intensive. So these are the proportion of tasters, non-tasters, and super tasters in the North American population. But later on, other studies have demonstrated that these ratios differ depending on the culture and on the heritage of the participants. So how do you determine your taster status? So the one measure that the researchers started to use was to count the density of fungiform papillae on the tongue. You may know that we have taste buds all over the tongue and they are grouped in papillae formation, and there are different types of papillae formations on the tongue. The front part of the tongue is covered by fungiform papillae that are called that way because they look like a mushroom when you look at them very closely. So they would taint the tongue of research participants in blue, and usually a technician or student would identify the area where fungiform papillae are located on the participant tongue and count patiently the number of papillae observed. And the result is that super tasters tend to have a higher density of fungiform papillae on their tongue. The other measure that was used as well was to taste prop solutions or using a paper strip that are dipped in prop solution so that people could put a strip of paper on their tongue and then measure the intensity they were perceiving of the bitterness perception. So you can find this paper strip online. They come in this type of tubes, 100 paper strip for less than $10 usually. But make sure that you select the prop compound, not the PTC, because PTC has been found as carcinogenic. So you don't want to put that in your mouth. Prop is okay. So as you do the test, I strongly advise that you have a glass of water nearby and a sweet candy nearby. Because once you put the paper strip on your tongue and you wait 10, 20 seconds, and you can use this type of scale to measure the intensity from, it's barely detectable, I can't perceive anything, to it's the strongest imaginable sensation I've ever perceived. You use this scale to measure this intensity. And if you are a super taster, this intensity of bitterness can be really, really unpleasant. So to counteract the effect of the bitterness, have the sweet candy after the test so that the sweetness of the candy counterbalance the perception of bitterness, so the next few minutes will be more pleasant for you. So how the results look like. So these are results presented by Dr. Bartoshuk's team. And you can see on these two graphs, on the horizontal axis is represented the concentration of the compound prop, and on the vertical axis a measure of the intensity. So the graph on the left used the scale I just showed you, and the graph on the right showed a different scale. But you can see the same pattern. The non-taster barely detect anything. The medium taster perceive the bitterness, between moderate and strong. And then the super tasters are very distinct, have a very distinct response, going from above very strong intensity to close to strongest imaginable. So what does it mean to be a super taster? Well, a great analogy that Dr. Bartoshuk herself shared with us is that a super taster lives in a neon world, a neon colors world, whereas the non-taster lives in a pastel world. But here's the thing, seeing the world in neon colors doesn't make you a great painter or doesn't make you a superior art critic or art evaluator. And it's the same thing for wine evaluators that are super tasters. It doesn't give you superpowers. However, what it gives you is the ability to sense with greater intensity several oral sensations, and it can become very unpleasant for you to taste very tannic wine or high alcoholic wines because it really burns and irritates your oral cavity. So again, what does it mean to be a super taster when you are a wine taster? Is there any correlation between the two status? As I mentioned before, there is none, because being a super taster is about perceiving oral sensations differently. You experience, as a super taster, you experience much higher intensity in terms of basic taste, especially bitterness, alcohol burn, pungency, and astringency that is imparted by the wine tannins. But does it make you a smarter, blind wine taster at the next sommelier competition? No. It doesn't give you any superior ability to pinpoint, the origin of the wine, the way it was made, or the specific attributes to describe the wine. What really improves those qualities, those skills, is a sensory training and focusing more on the aromatic components and the balance of the different oral components of wine. So it's not a genetic trait to be able to nail the sommelier competition or to develop great tasting notes. It's about training. So the next thing after tasting is to know what to do with your results. And it's really about understanding your sensory blind spot. Whether you are a super taster or non-taster, what does it mean for you when you taste wine? Pay more attention to how you experience food and how you experience wine. Do you notice you are more sensitive to the heat of spicy meals like I am? Or, do you perceive high alcoholic wine, much more warming, much more irritating in your mouth? And this is very important when you taste wine with others because it helps you moderate your comment about the wine. Since you are perceiving the world of wine differently, it's important to be able to moderate your evaluation and not argue with others because you perceive that particular wine so burning or so astringent, whereas a non-taster might just say, well, it's a bit dry. It's not that much astringent. So it's important to understand our blind spot and our physiology and genetic traits when we are able to test ourselves, because it has some impact in our way of evaluating wines and knowing how to share these evaluations. And as it comes to aromatic perceptions, there is no correlation with your taster status. It's not because you're super tasters that you are able to perceive very fine nuances of flavors in wines. The only way to do that is sensory training and training your nose. So how do you improve your wine tasting skills? You don't need to be born a super taster. You don't need to purchase, very expensive wines or taste hundreds of wines to really train your palate. What you need to do is awaken your senses, being more mindful of what you smell and what you taste. You can use the nose framework I shared in a previous video. It takes just 5 minutes every day to be more mindful about what you sense in the world surrounding you, to make note of it, and to memorize what the scent and the name of the object emitting the scent are, so you can make those connections. You can also be more intentional and every day opening your kitchen cabinet to smell or taste different spices, smell any fragrant product in your household. So you take this habit of being more engaged with your senses and pay more attention to what they detect, because you may detect similar aromas and taste in a wine later on. So what do you need to remember? Being a super taster just means that you are highly sensitive to bitterness and other oral sensations, mouthfeel attributes, alcohol burning, astringency, pungency. It doesn't mean that you have magic powers to evaluate wine aromas. Training your nose is really the real path to wine sensory description mastery, if it is what you want to achieve, or at least elevate your tasting skills so you can detect more flavor nuances and being able to share why you like a particular wine with others, or being able later on to enter the wine industry and contribute to the evaluation of wine quality. So relying on your senses, committing to be more mindful every day and awaken your senses is the secret to become a more discerning taster. And by relying on these daily practices, you will start becoming more confident, noticing more nuances in the glass of wine, and you will stop second-guessing yourself and trust your senses. So if you need help with leveling up your wine tasting skills, I invite you to join our Curious Palates community. It's a free community hosted on School. And when you join, you are invited to follow a 14-day onboarding program, including a 7-day mindful practice, so to get you into the habit of becoming more mindful and noticing more a scent around you and awakening your sense of smell. I would love to hear from you as well. Have you ever been tasted for your prop status or your super taster status? If yes, share below in the comment if you live in a neon color world or more in a pastel world. I would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it and share it with others. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you soon. And remember, stop guessing, start sensing, and have a very good day. À bientôt.